Now that we've installed the CodeChat Editor, let's put it to use. If you haven't yet installed it, please watch the installation video. For this example, we're going to use the Coding Game website to provide us an opportunity to solve a programming problem called There Is No Spoon Episode 1. So let's just begin by taking the provided template code, copying that and pasting it into our IDE. I'm just going to start a new file, paste in the code, and we're going to save that as a nice Python file. Now that we've got the file saved, let's take a look at how CodeChat interprets this file and how we could take advantage of what CodeChat does for us. Let's take a look at how CodeChat understands a file. From CodeChat's perspective, files consist of code blocks such as lines 1 to 3 here, and doc blocks such as line 4, which is interpreted as markdown and nicely formatted over here in our IDE. In contrast, line 6 is interpreted as a code block, not as a doc block, because doc blocks cannot contain code on the same line. Likewise, doc blocks must start with a comment character followed by a space to be considered a doc block. If we omit that space, or if we add a non-space character at the beginning, it will treat that as a code block and not a doc block. So for example, if we'd like to format these a bit more nicely, let's just put them onto the preceding line, and now they're treated as a doc block. Also, remember that we are writing in a word processor here. Let's treat our comments as if they're complete sentences. I'm going to add a period and capital letters to dress this up a little bit. And in addition, I'm going to connect these comments by making it all one doc block. Likewise, let's clean up this comment as well. Make that a nice full and complete sentence as well. And continue with edits in similar ways. Notice again that it's easy to edit on either side of the window. I can use a GUI. For example, I want to treat this as the number monospace 0, or I can edit over here by adding the appropriate markdown codes. And you'll see immediate results reflected on the other side of your window. Notice another thing that CodeChat does, it automatically word wraps our comments. This line used to be 2 separate lines like this, and it was automatically word wrapped. Let's make that a little bit clearer. Again, what we're really trying to do here is make that have a monospaced font, and we just need a little bit of period here to more clearly illustrate what we're doing. Finally, what we'll do is we'll put this on a separate line with a backslash to indicate a line break, and then we'll just join these 2 lines nicely. If you're wondering, where do all these formatting options come from? Again, this is a syntax called Markdown. Here's a nice website that goes through most of the common Markdown things that is in use here, from how to add italics and bold, headings, links, the backticks we've been using for inline code, and other things. More information is available. Simply Google on Common Mark, try out the 10-minute tutorial, or take a look at the other information provided on this website. As we mentioned earlier, CodeChat is a programmer's word processor. Let's think more like writing a document here. Let's add a heading to introduce what this program is and explain where it comes from. So I'm going to start by putting a £sign in. That would cause the CodeChat editor to treat this as a comment in Python. And then I can add a nice title in. And in addition, I'll go ahead and style those things and clear up a couple errors. And let's go ahead and make this a heading 1 per the web recommendations. We should have only one heading 1 per document. So this will be the big title for our document. After that, let's explain where this file came from. So let's put in a hyperlink to To save time, I simply pasted in some content describing what the file is. And let's go ahead and add a hyperlink here. I'm going to hit Control K on my keyboard to add a hyperlink, and we'll just grab the URL from that coding game website, paste it in, and as soon as we hit save, it'll be reflected over here on our IDE. And at any time, if we need to go back and refer to it, we can always right-click and open that link so another person can understand where this came from. Let me always encourage you to give each file you write a title and a heading one. I prefer to also put the file name to specify where this file comes from, and use hyperlinks to describe and give the readers of your program some context. Let's now break our code into some convenient sections, just to make this a bit more clear. So first up, in most Python programs, we'll have some imports. Next, it's time to input our data, and we'll just again label this clearly, and then explain what we're doing. We're going to read data provided by the challenge. Next, let's describe the process of reading in the grid of cells that we've got. And let's be a bit more specific about what that is. I'm just going to use the minus sign, and as soon as I hit a space bar, I've got some nice bullet points that I can type in. I'll go ahead and type these in to save us time. And of course, all the information we're discussing here comes straight from a careful reading of that coding game website. Now, one thing that I think will really help clarify this is let's put in an image of the grid and the corresponding text of the grid to really clarify what we've got. So I'll just go and save this image as a file, and once I save that, we'll bring it into the software. Let's call it example grid. And I'll save it in the same directory where I've been working on this code. Once it's saved, let's insert it in the CodeChat Editor. To do this, I'm just going to use the Markdown syntax for inserting an image, which is exclamation point, square brackets with an optional description of the image, and then the file name. In this case, since it's in the same directory, we can just type the file name in. If not, I would need to type in a path relative to the location where this file is stored. So our image is in there. And we can see after saving the image that here's the actual text that we would read into our program. So let's add that as well to our documentation. So now we've got an image to explain the grid. We've got the text that corresponds with the image to make it really clear what that data looks like. And these are all things that help other people understand your program and help you do a better job of writing the code itself. So I've pasted in a few more comments on how that data gets stored. Notice a couple subtleties that we're reading it in as line y comma x, but our coordinates are x comma y. There's some reversed order, so I was sure to note that in the code. Also notice in terms of formatting, when I put a $sign around something, that denotes a equation. And there's a whole equation syntax using some software called MathJax that is identical to LaTeX equations that allow me to capture a host of very complicated equations. For more information on LaTeX equations, there's a great reference here on Wikibooks that goes through all the syntax you can use to produce symbols and Greek letters and operators and all those things. That's all supported right in the CodeChat Editor simply by putting $signs on either side of an equation that you have, and it'll format that nicely. Here again, I've dumped in some more text to be descriptive. All I did was went to the rules, copied down the rules, and then just made sure to insert that as a block quote so it's really clear that I'm quoting from something else. And these rules come, again, directly from the website. So I just copied those in, indent them as a block quote, and again that gives us good explanation of why we're doing what we're doing. Here I've added a bit more thoughts on what exactly we mean by a cell, how we're going to name the variables, and then our process for going ahead and solving the problem. Notice again we're using lists, we're using monospace type, we're using headings to very clearly indicate what section of the program we're in and guide people through the code that we wrote. Last but not least, I'll just finish this up, and hopefully this gives you good ideas about how to treat a program like a document and use the CodeChat Editor to put in the richness of a document's content as you create a program. Here's the final bit of the program. Again, we notice things like to explain this +1 factor, we put a little note in the code with a monospace to explain why we're doing that, and comments on what the else expression in Python does, since that's a rarely used feature of the language. And then some brief comments saying we're just repeating the same thing. Notice our variable naming convention, x3 equal x1, y2. All these variable namings go right back to what we promised here. So we very clearly specified what those variables are. And in fact, we named the variables directly out of the original website's provided naming. Specifically, that comes from the data right here. So in conclusion, we've used literate programming to provide a brief and yet fairly complete documentation of how we solved a problem. We included an image to clarify along with the text. We've used headings, we've used hyperlinks, we've used monospace fonts, all ways to explain what we're doing. I hope the tutorial's been helpful, and I invite you to watch an advanced tutorial where we look at additional features of the CodeChat Editor.